Greetings unicorns. Hello from Melbourne in the land of Oz. Our names are Alison Bennett, Megan Beckwith, and Mark Payne. We want to tell you about a virtual reality artwork we made called Virtual Drag. We are also going to talk about how we think that queer thinking and conceptual ideas about drag performance can open up interesting possibilities for thinking about virtual reality. The work features 3D scans of drag queens and drag kings made with photogrammetry. We were interested in exploring this photographic technique for creating assets for virtual reality. The virtual reality experience goes for about 10 minutes and is comprised of 4 scenes built around the personalities of 6 drag personas. The personas are the magnificent Phil Marbox, the Deviant Simone, the knee-weakening Transylvanian Gypsy Kings, and Jackie Hammer, who is simply a bit of a hot mess really. Virtual Drag was a collaborative project that employed an organic process that combined our complementary skills and passions. Alison Bennett is a neuroqueer new media artist who works in expanded photography. She is perhaps best known for her series Inverto featured on ABC TV's Australian Story from Daddy's Tummy. For Virtual Drag, Bennett collaborated with Megan Beckwith, winner of the inaugural Australia Post Art Prize, dance choreographer and 3D animator who has been described by the Age newspaper as a trailblazer, and Mark Payne, an award-winning designer and artist working with photogrammetry. The project was funded by the Australian government through the Australia Council for the Arts, its arts funding and advisory body. We also had assistance from Deakin Motion Lab and Media Lab Melbourne. The 3D models were created using a technique called photogrammetry. The photogrammetry process uses the shifts in perspective between each photograph to construct a 3D mesh model of the subject. The surface is constructed from a patchwork of the photographs wrapped around it. The glitchy imperfect quality of the process was not erased in order to explore the qualities of the process. Indeed, we are aware that there has developed a normative look and style within digital artworks that we wanted to rupture. The glitchy qualities of our process was part of this investigation. The models were animated with minimalist choreography by inserting armature that also defied conventions. Finally, the animated models were placed in a 3D computer game environment that allowed the viewer to look around the virtual environment in real time. The process was relatively fast. The project took about 4 months to build. The virtual reality work is presented with the VR headsets resting on white dressing tables. The installation included prints of the model textures that reveal something of the process behind the work. Virtual Drag was a premiere event for the Midsummer Queers Arts Festival in February this year. The launch included performances, a whacking dance battle, a runway competition. We were then invited to present the work to a mainstream audience at Kingston Arts Centre. At Kingston we also had the Transylvanian Gypsy Kings entertain people waiting to use the VR headsets. There was a lovely fission as people came out of the VR headsets and found themselves face to face with the drag personas in real life. We were invited to show the work at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image as part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival, and Virtual Drag has just been included in the final leg of the Kaleidoscope World Tour, an international touring showcase of virtual reality experiences. Virtual Drag generated a small buzz internationally in new media art circles. It was featured on the uber cool UK-based blog Prosthetic Knowledge, and picked up by Tumblr Radar. The Creators Project declared virtual reality art gets what it's sorely been missing, drag queens. The story has since been translated into French, Greek, and Chinese. The computer game culture magazine Killscreen noted that the convergence of virtual reality and drag realness opened a rabbit hole of accelerating conceptual possibilities. The Killscreen article was retweeted by New Incorporated, the art technology incubator of the New Museum in New York. Why did we make virtual drag? We think drag is important. It may be the most visible of queer identity performance, but it is by no means vapid. Drag queens are the warriors of gay pride. The gay rights movement has been characterized by a pushback against gender roles and queering the performance of gender. It was trans women, drag queens and butch-presenting women that instigated the Stonewall riots. They were being arrested for cross-dressing, not simply for being homosexual. So much of the early work in virtual reality has been driven by naked girls presented for a male gaze. As queer new media artists, we have been inspired by artists that queer digital spaces such as Jacoby Satterwhite, a New York-based Vogue dance artist who presents his performance work in virtual digital spaces, and London-based Zachbla's Queer Technologies project. So we wanted to explore the idea of queering virtual reality. What we discovered was that drag offers some interesting ways of rethinking virtual reality. The intersections between virtuality and drag stem from ways of speaking about virtual reality as simulation and the drag definition of realness. We now want to talk theory. We hope you find this as amusing as we do. Speaking academically, the notion of the virtual drag project appeared like a bright flash. Let's make 3D scans of drag queens. Like much of this project, the conceptual resonance continues to unfold with great energy and strength. Prompted by a comment on the prosthetic knowledge post about the virtuality of drag, we began to unpack the concepts of virtual and drag in a bit more detail. It is not our intention to be didactic or declarative. We are more interested in posing questions, playing with possibilities, with opening up poetic resonance and participating in ongoing conversations. There are fascinating and powerful conjunctions and intersections between the concepts of virtuality and the performance of drag persona. These resonances stem from discourses about virtual reality as simulation and simulacra, with the drag definition of realness. Both prompt us to consider the construction of the real. Virtual. Virtual has several meanings, some relating to virtue and virtuousness, but it slides through notions of quality, as in goodness, to having the quality of something. It has come to relate mostly to similarity, virtually the same, verisimilitude. Whilst the virtual is as old as the media of writing, in digital culture it relates to notions of simulation, imitation of real things, and simulacra, copies of things for which there is no original. Virtual reality. The Oxford English Dictionary dates the term virtual reality from the 1970s and defines it as a computer-generated simulation of a lifelike environment that can be interacted with in a seemingly real or physical way by a person, especially by means of responsive hardware such as a visor with screen or gloves with sensors, such environments or the associated technology as a medium of activity or field of study, cyberspace. Now, we don't have the space or time to tackle the notion of reality with any completeness at this point, so let us put it out there as holding point. We posit that reality is not a fixed concept and its interrogation is one of the driving forces of both art and science. For example, Daniel Rubinstein's Manifesto on 21st Century Photography concludes that through the practice of digital photography, we come to understand that the real world is nothing more than so much information plucked out of chaos, the randomized and chaotic conflation of bits of matter, strands of DNA, subatomic particles and computer code. Virtuality. Virtuality, the dynamic quality of being virtual, has an emergent liminal quality. It is a process of an idealized potential becoming actualized. And here we mean actualized as tangible and perceptible, not necessarily real or physical. Curiously, the virtual, the quality of virtuality, relates to both emergence and dissolution. It relates to the things that press against the tangible, that are emergent, but it also points to the dissolution of the boundary between the ephemeral ideal and that which can be perceived. Part of the attraction of the virtual is the potential for new forms of agency. We do not intend to ascribe to the utopian hype of VR, but the virtual is inherently idealistic regardless of the media through which it is manifest. The virtual in this sense is nothing new. Its associations with the ultra-modern, the digital and life abstracted from the material real are only the present guise of something much older. The virtual is as old as writing itself. It is nothing new, but it drives the new. It is that which compels the generation of thought. Goodrich points to Baudrillard's notion of the collapse of the distinction between the real and the virtual. For Baudrillard, the virtual does not indicate a difference across orders, but indeed the complete collapse of orders, so that the real and the virtual become indistinguishable, on an ontological level. For Baudrillard, images have lost their ability to be virtual because the real referent can no longer be distinguished. What once was designated as virtual is now more present than reality itself, or reality is so imbricated with these images that the difference becomes moot. Against virtuality, Baudrillard posits the hyperreal. This collapse might also be seen in the emergence of the post-human cyborg as a cultural entity, of the collapse of the categories of human, technological, natural. What might the concept of virtuality reveal when applied to the practice of drag culture? What could drag reveal about the emergence of virtual cultural paradigms? What might the drag concept of realness reveal about the structures that constitute virtual reality? Drag. As usual, gender theorist Judith Butler wipes the floor with her fierce insight. In the following passage from her 1990 essay Imitation and Gender Insubordination, Butler argues there is no original gender expression. She positions gender as simulacra, a copy of a copy. Heterosexual gender is also performative but seeks to position itself as original. The performance of drag reveals these structures. Drag is not the putting on of a gender that belongs properly to some other group, that is an act of expropriation or appropriation that assumes that gender is the rightful property of sex, that masculine belongs to male and feminine belongs to female. There is no proper gender, a gender proper to one sex rather than another, which is in some sense that sex's cultural property. Where the notion of the proper operates, it is always and only improperly installed as the effect of a compulsory system. Drag constitutes the mundane way in which genders are appropriated, theatricalized, worn, and done. It implies that all gendering is a kind of impersonation and approximation. If this is true, it seems, there is no original or primary gender that drag imitates, but gender is a kind of imitation that produces the very notion of the original as an effect and consequence of the imitation itself. Drag is not assimilation or appropriation of an original and proper gender but a joyful critique and celebration, a copy of a copy of a copy, a knowing wink, a profoundly queer insertion in the complex theater and becoming of identity. Realness. In Jenny Livingston's documentary Paris is Burning on the 1980s New York drag ballroom scene, Dorian Corey discusses the concept of realness. In a ballroom, you can be anything you want. You're not really an executive, but you're looking like an executive. And therefore, you're showing the straight world that, I can be an executive. If I had the opportunity, I can be one. Because I can look it. And that is a kind of fulfillment. Your friends, your peers, are telling you, oh, you'd make a wonderful executive. queer theorist Tim Dean expands. For the characters in Paris is Burning, realness is the ultimate accolade, since this term denotes the degree of successful imitation produced by a gender performance. As an effect of scrupulously accurate mimesis, realness is in some sense the social or subcultural equivalent of the aesthetic category of realism. Literary critics such as Roland Barthes have argued for the concept of reality effect as undercutting the aesthetic of realism by showing how pre-representational reality, to whose faithful imitation the transparency of realist representation aspires, is itself the effect of highly complex and artificial rhetorical codes. Similarly, gender critics such as Butler argue that drag realness undermines the ontological or existential status of every identity, especially gender identity, by showing the imitative and fictive structure of identity, and thence of everything reality. Realness reveals social reality as a construct, something fabricated. Drag realness resonates with virtuality, the manifestation of the constructed and contingent frameworks of culture and identity, the liminal transit, vector between ideal and tangible. It is both superficial and core, which is fabulous. Now, we are not saying that gender expression is inauthentic, arbitrary or fake. Butler's point is that gender is performative, virtual as both emergence and dissolution, that it is manifest through reenactment and reproduction. Indeed, gender expression is a process, a transition, a becoming. What we are saying is that gender does not have a proper expression, but that gender expression does not have belong exclusively to any particular group or classification. In conclusion, as we said, we are not seeking to make didactic statements about the virtual drag project. Our purpose here is to articulate starting points and foundations. This creative project is a means of investigating these ideas, not a means of presenting already resolved positions. Indeed, we make work as a means of posing questions because we have yet to grasp something. Through the process of making and exhibiting this work, we are exploring the potentials of the relationship between drag and virtual. Not only is this an opportunity to ask how virtuality might reflect upon gender, but, perhaps even more interestingly, how might the notion of realness and the practice of drag performance offer fresh perspectives on the cultural production of virtual reality. Perhaps virtual reality is a limited term for the potentials of this technology. Virtual implies similarity, that this medium creates an experience similar to reality. Perhaps a more open term might be alternative reality or potential reality. Shifting the terminology might shift our intent and thinking about what is possible to create and communicate with this medium. Rather than the intent being to reproduce experiences as mediated by our embodied senses, we are interested in the potential of this medium to create and communicate alternative potential realities. We encourage you to insert queerness into technology, not just in terms of networking and content, but also in terms of processes, in how you design and undertake projects. Just as heteronormative conventions restrict possibilities in other areas, there are invisible conventions that restrict our thinking in digital technology spaces. As unicorns, we have the power to open up these frameworks. Thank you for having us at UNIT. Our friend Alexander Edwards has a virtual reality headset at UNIT today if you would like to take a look at virtual drag in stereo. We have also made a link to a 360 video available on our website for you today. You can view the 360 video at virtualdrag.net. Damn, can't have a wonderful festival. Damn, can't have a wonderful festival. Damn, can't have a wonderful festival.